For lesson 34, let's talk about multiplying by decimals or by powers of 10 when we're dealing with decimals. Remember that when we divided by 10, I said you always move the decimal point, the number of zeros, to the left. When we multiply by 10, we're going to move the decimal point, the number of zeros, to the right. So in other words, if I had the number 0.1 and I was multiplying 0.1 times 10, well, that's number of zeros is 1, so I'm going to move it one place to the right, and I end up with the number of 1, whole number of 1, which I don't really have to put the decimal. If I took the same 0.1 and I multiplied it times 100, well, 100 has 2 zeros. I'd move my decimal point 2 places to the right, and I would end up with the number 10. If I take that same 0.1 and I multiplied it times 1,000, how many places would I move my decimal? 1, 2, 3 places to the right. Well, that's a 1 with 2 zeros. Check it out. It was already up here over in front of the 1, so now it's got to have 2 more zeros in order to move it. So it ends up being 100. So when we multiply by a power of 10, you just move it to the right. Now, when we're dealing with equations, we want to clear decimals just the same way we cleared fractions. It's easier for us to solve equations when we're dealing with whole numbers. So what we need to decide is what number do I multiply by? 10, 100, 1,000? Well, the number of decimal places in my equation will tell me the largest number of decimal places. Example number 1 has 3 terms, 0.7x, 0.1, and 1.5. Each of those terms only has 1 decimal place. If I multiply them times a 10, they will become whole numbers. Remember, a 10 with 1 0 moves the decimal 1 point to the right, and that's all I need to get rid of 1 decimal place. So I'm going to say 0.7x times 10 will give me 7x. 0.1 times 10 is going to give me a 1, and 1.5 times 10 is going to give me 15. Now look at your equation. 7x plus 1 equals 15 is a lot less prone to mistakes than 0.7x plus 0.1 equals 1.5. Let's go ahead and finish it. We'll subtract 1 from both sides. We'll say 7x is now equal to 14. We'll divide by 7, and x is going to equal 14 divided by 7, or 2. And there's my answer. Example 2, let's look. Do I have decimals? I have an equation. I have decimals. Same rule applies. This only works when you have equations. I only have one number that has 1 decimal point. So I still have to multiply all terms by the same number. I can't just multiply 1 times the 10. That wouldn't work. I'll have to multiply them all times the 10 in order to move my decimal place. But 3y times 10 gives me an easy number to work with. It's 30y. Oh, by the way, that 7t is not really 7t, it's 7y. 7y times 10 will give me 70y. And then 24.4 times 10 is going to give me 244. All whole numbers. Once again, no decimals. How do I get my y's together? Well, okay, I've got 2 ways. I'm going to go ahead and subtract this 70y, even though it's going to give me a negative, because it's sort of like a shortcut here since everything else was on the other side of the equation. If I say 30y minus 70y, I end up with a negative 40y. That's equal to 244. Now what I need to do here is divide by a negative 40, both sides. Well, I know my answer is going to be a negative number. What's it going to be? Well, it's probably going to be a decimal. So let's do the division over here on the side. 244 divided by a negative 40 is going to give me a negative answer. I'm going to see where my decimal goes in my answer because I might have some decimal places. I'll just go ahead and place it just in case. 40 will go into 244. Well, 6 times. 6 times 0, 6 times 4. Subtract, and I do need to bring down another 0, so it's a good thing I've got the decimal there. 40 will go into 40 this time 1 time, and I'm finished. What's my answer? Negative 6.1. All right, example 3 has 4 terms in this problem. The 4 terms have 1 decimal point in 1 decimal place in the first number. The second number is a whole number. The second term is a whole number. 1.2, 1 decimal point. place and 12.2 one decimal place. We can clear them by multiplying each term by a 10, which doesn't change anything too much, and let's just write it down and see how it makes our equations easier. 1.5x times 10, 15x. 2 times 10, 20. Negative 1.2x times 10, negative 12x. And that's all equal to 12.2 times 10, 122. Now, combine like terms. Simplify over here on the left. I've got 15x, negative 12x. That's going to be 3x plus 20 equals 122. Let's subtract that 20 so we can isolate the variable term. We'll get rid of that. We'll have 3x, and it's equal to 102. I think I'm going to have to divide both sides by 3. And I may need to write that down because it's not something I can do in my head. 102 divided by 3. I'm going to put a decimal just in case I need it. 3 into 10 will give me 3. That's multiplies 9, 12. 3 into 12 is 4. I didn't really need my decimal place, but that's okay because I had it just in case. The answer, x is equal to 34. All right, let's take example number 4. I have 3 terms, 2x, which is a whole number, negative 4.2, which is one decimal place, and 8.6, one decimal place. We can clear all the decimals by multiplying by the number 10, which would move them one decimal place. So let's do that. 2x times 10, 20x. Negative 4.2 times 10, negative 42. Our equal sign, 8.6 times 10, 86. Now, I'm not dealing with decimals anymore, so I just solve my equation as usual. I will isolate the variable term by subtracting this 42 or adding 42 to both sides. I end up with 20x equal to 128. I'm going to need to divide both sides by 20. And I'll have x is equal to 128 divided by 20. Looks like it's going to have a decimal, and I might have to have some zeros. I'll go ahead and put them down just in case. 20 into 128, well, it's going to go 6 times 20 is 120. Bring down my 8 and 0. 20 into 80 is 4. And my answer, x is equal to 6.4. Example number 5 has y minus 3.6 is equal to 4. Well, there's only one number that has one decimal place, but we're still going to clear the decimals by multiplying each term times the number 10. It just makes our equations easier to solve. So I'll multiply y times 10, I'll multiply negative 3.6 times 10, and I'll multiply 4 times 10. Y times 10 will give me 10y. Negative 3.6 times 10 is going to give me a negative 36, and 4 times 10 is 40. Once again, I just solve the equation as usual. Then I'm going to isolate the variable term by getting rid of this negative 36. I have 10y now is equal to 76. I need to divide both of them by 10. When I divide by 10, remember, all I have to do is move the decimal one place to the left from here to here, turns this number into 7.6. My answer, y is equal to 7.6. And finally, number 6. I finally have a number that has more than one decimal place. Negative 0.02x, I'm going to have to multiply that times 100 to clear it. So I have to multiply everything times 100. There's only 2 terms in the problem, though. So I multiply negative 0.02 times 100. I end up with negative 2x. And I multiply negative 1.2 times 100. I end up with negative, and I have to move it 2 places, 2 zeros, 2 places. I end up with negative 120. It's easy now to solve. Divide by the coefficient of the variable, which is negative 2. I end up with x is equal to negative 120 divided by negative 2. That's going to be a positive answer. If you have doubts about where to put the numbers, then write it down. And you would find out that that your answer is going to be 60.